Hi, I'm Martin Ranscombe, and I specialise these days in drummers' health, basically. So that can be anything from technique right through to how they sit, the ergonomics, lifestyle. We can go into more of that in a second if you want, but it's looking at the whole thing holistically. That's the point. And how did I get here? Well, cut a very long story short, I was born with a congenital bone condition, which affects mobility of all the joints. And so I chose drumming as my career, which was an interesting choice, perhaps not the best one. But anyway, as I reached my, let's say, late 20s, early 30s, I suddenly became very aware that if I wanted to continue my role as a professional player, this might be hampered potentially by my condition. Unfortunately, the condition is so rare that no one really covers it, unfortunately. So I had to do a lot of my own research, and before the days of the internet and all that kind of stuff, it's hard work. It's got better in recent times, obviously. And through that, I started to study, I say study, that's the wrong word. I started to involve myself in looking at biomechanics, the way that muscles work, limbs and so on, that kind of thing, just to try and, for myself, basically, to understand how I could maintain my career. That was the bottom line, whilst continuing to play and just do normal stuff. And later on, as I started to get into teaching people in a conventional sense, if you like, I started to build up more and more of a library in my brain as to how people were going about things, especially as I inherited students that, from my perspective, I felt their technique was going to actually work against them. And so I started to gradually sort of bring this more into play in terms of how I looked at playing and how other people play and the problems they were having. And I started sort of organically getting older students, if you like, adults, professional players and so on, who had problems. And typical problems might be things like wrists, elbows, necks, that kind of stuff. And I found that my knowledge that I developed over the years for myself was very applicable. And so it sort of kind of went from there, really. And I started, because again, from my own perspective, I look at everything from what I eat to what I drink to what I do outside of drumming, and started again to apply that back to my clients. And so this kind of grew to the point now where I would say that, big head as it might seem, I'm probably the only person that I certainly if I've come across that can look entirely at a drummer or percussionist way of moving and how they can apply what they need to know. So it's not just improving someone's technique, which often it can be actually, just to avoid injury, but also again looking at all those other things like lifestyle choices. There's another big element to all of this, which I don't mind admitting. I'm also clinical depressive, which is something I've battled all my life. So the mental health element of it, which of course is very topical, that can play a big part, stress, those sorts of things. So, and certainly for performers, anybody who's a performer of any type will tell you that there's all kinds of peaks and troughs of well-being within oneself, if that makes sense. And so I look at all that stuff as well, because it can have such an impact. Well, mainly if it's drummers who use sticks, or indeed those who use their hands, for example, if they're conga players, that kind of thing, djembe players even. It's typically wrists, hands, forearms, elbows. That's the kind of thing you might typically expect. But sometimes you'll have neck and shoulder problems, lower back problems is another common one. Most of it is all tied in with the same thing, actually, but we won't bore you with the details of that now. But yes, those are the typical, what you might typically expect to a lesser or greater degree. And some people, unfortunately, might have more than one. In fact, that's often the case. So it's trying to understand what, if you like, the root causes of those things are. And usually, I would say, you can't quantify exactly, but I would say probably 90% of the time, the perceived problem is very different to what it actually is. It is absolutely vital because, like I said earlier, if you have, just to give you a very simple analogy, if you like, if you've got somebody who's playing a lot, practicing a lot, and working very hard, it's very easy to go, oh, well, it's because I've been practicing 5 hours a day for 10 years, and of course I've destroyed my body a bit. But sometimes you need to peel back those layers and say, okay, what else are you doing? Oh, well, I use a mouse a lot. Oh, really? Well, there you go. That's something that could be interesting. Why do you do that? Or I've got very bad posture. Why have I got bad posture? Well, there's all, so it can be, it's never, ever, in my experience, one thing. So it's important, someone in my role, to look at everything. And that literally, as I said earlier, it could be anything from how you eat, how you sit, even how you drive your car. There's all kinds of elements of this that all play in. And unfortunately, most of us are extremely bad at it in terms of keeping an eye on these sorts of things. And we like to attribute it to what it is we're doing. So, and the other problem can be that if you experience discomfort whilst you're doing said subject, it's very easy then to go, well, that's the problem. When I don't do it, I don't get hurt. Maybe it's the playing that's manifesting the problem, but it's not actually what's causing it. So it's so important to do that.
Yeah.
But I would like people to at least walk away with the idea that I need to look at these key elements of my overall being. It sounds a bit existential, but you know what I mean. It's that idea of, okay, so I play like this, I practice like this, I live like this, I eat like this, whatever the issues might be, to at least come away from it and say, okay, I need to actually look at all these things. And it may well be that, if you pick 10 and there's 7 that are fine, but there's still those other 3 that need to be looked at. Yeah. So if I can achieve that, from my perspective, I'd have done my job in that webinar.